Hello and welcome to the Rask Network. What you're about to hear and see is limited to general financial information only. Please be sure to speak to your financial planner or refer to our financial services guide available at rask.com.au/FSG before acting on the information.
Welcome back to the Australian Retirement Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about traps and risks to avoid before retirement. I'm here with Drew Meredith. Hey mate, how are you going today?
Pretty good. Good to be here.
This is going to be a ripper session. We've got lots of really cool stuff to get through, but really the key focus for us is that we want to address some of the really common mistakes that we see when people come to us and say, hey, I'd like some help with my retirement. We say, where are you up to so far? And they say, I've done these 3 good things and these 4 terrible things.
They turn up with a statement. Usually that's it. Come on, can you be a magician? Help me out. That's what advisors are supposed to do.
We've taken the liberty of separating this as best we can. We're going to talk about quite a few things. We're talking about self-managed superannuation funds, industry funds, thinking about if you're working with a financial advisor, how do you pick the right one for you? Yeah. So without any further ado, I reckon we kick off and let's go through some of these things and try to add as much value as we can.
Excited. This will be a good one.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's start, if I may, around self-managed superannuation funds, because you have a lot of engagement with self-managed superannuation funds, as I understand.
Yeah. So we're fairly investment focused and retiree focused, which means superannuation is a massive part of everything we do, and it should be. As an Australian looking to self-fund your retirement, superannuation makes complete sense. We've covered that in a few previous episodes. And SMSFs, as we said, I think in the previous one, are just an extension of that, which is they offer significantly more flexibility, but not without the ability for things to go wrong quite easily. And we've explained in the past that the SMSF allows essentially any Australian to have complete control and deal with every dollar that they've ever saved in retirement, which is pretty rare when you look around the world. So not having any real framework around the way you're making investment decisions, whether you've got an advisor or not. And we'd both know having an advisor with an SMSF doesn't always help either. There's enough stories about that. But if in any time you're managing money, you want to think about the people you're managing it for and at least put together some sort of framework through which to be investing that, I think is one of the biggest lessons we see. And in terms of some of the biggest I think when you talk about mistakes as a financial advisor, and I'm not sure if you explain it to clients this way as well, but when people talk about our fees, we essentially say if we stop you from making one mistake that hundreds and thousands of people have made before you, we're paying for ourselves every year. And that mistake could be anything. It could be the way you've invested. It could be the amount of insurance you have, the mortgage you've taken on, or it could be any realm of things, but they all have, when you're talking about such larger amounts of wealth, just the smallest difference can have a significant impact. Mm-hmm. What are some of the biggest issues you see with your SMSF clients?
Without a doubt, the biggest one for mine is that they shouldn't have one.
That's right.
So as you pointed out, of course, huge amount of flexibility, and for the right individual in the right circumstances, they have no peer. But regrettably, I meet a lot of people who sit down and say, okay, well, I'd like you to review my situation. 4 years ago, I set up a self-managed superannuation fund. I bought either one property through it, or I didn't have enough money yet to buy a property, so I just started investing.
Just sitting there in cash.
In cash. Sometimes in cash is better than what they were looking to do with their investments. There is a real, especially for accumulators, there is a real concern. Self-managed superannuation funds are often really oversold.
Yeah.
I think it really plays to people like control. People like the idea of having control over all of their money.
And it's good to be engaged with your money.
Absolutely. And what's more, if you're the sort of individual that harbors a level of distrust about what other people are doing with your money, rightly or wrongly, but particularly wrongly, then you can often find yourself falling for that illusion of I can do this better myself.
Yep.
And most people that I sit with who've gone down that path and said, look, I just started a self-managed super fund because I wanted control. Most of those people, when I look at their circumstances and reflect back, I feel that they would have been better just leaving the money in a normal accumulation fund or where it was before.
Is that usually cost or size driven? Like, is it because they haven't got enough assets yet, or is it because the cost of the SMSF, which they're kind of related?
Yeah, I think that cost is cost certainly plays a part. For example, we've talked before about with a self-managed superannuation fund, if you've got auditing fees and all of the costs all in, you're looking at a couple $1,000 a year at best. And so if you're doing that with $100,000 as a super balance, it's just too erosive. It's way too erosive. Yeah. But the bigger issue, as far as I'm concerned, is always the asset that you buy, because if we take property, for example,
there's been a tendency for some groups to recommend setting an SMSF just to buy a leveraged property.
That's right. Yeah. And much more concerningly for mine is that I'd like to think that it's happening less and less, but looking back or dealing with people over the last, let's say, decade, not only was there a tendency to say, hey, let's get your money into a property. Obviously Australians love property, yada, yada. But more importantly, these properties are rubbish. Yeah. These are off the plan, apartments
fees
in
everywhere.
Essendon, fees everywhere. Yeah. What you don't realize is that the advisor was in with the developer and they're getting a marketing fee in order to provide the property. And it's just the quality of those assets. Property, especially if you're borrowing money to invest in property, which most people would be doing through a self-managed superannuation fund, that means you're leveraging, you're borrowing into and investing in a particular asset, and leverage magnifies the gains and the losses. And often why property investment works so well is not because it outperforms super on an annual percentage basis, outperforms, let's say, shares or another asset. It's because you're leveraged.
5 times.
That's
so if you
right.
put a 20% deposit, you're 5 times leveraged.
That's right. Yeah. And so when you have a good story, it's magnificent. But when you have a bad story, it's rubbish. I've sat down with many people who have said, 8 years ago, I opened a self-managed superannuation fund on the advice of my accountant or someone who was attached to the accountant that I can't remember their name or what they gave me. And now I've got this problem because I spent $500K on this property and it's still worth $500K, and all the while I've had all these costs, and that's a really regrettable situation.
I think that's where, referring to like the accountants driving the establishment of SMSFs, I think that's one area where there is a trap. That, not saying accountants shouldn't be involved, and they're obviously allowed to advise on that, but what I've seen is that the price of and the SMSF annual accounts, the work you have to do every year for an SMSF is essentially commoditized. You'd see the same.
Yes.
It's basically a fixed cost. You can get it done for about $3.5 grand. So it makes it incredibly, cost effective for anyone over, I'd personally either, 500 but contributing a lot, or $1 million with assets in investing. But one of the biggest things is you need to shop around and make sure you've got a specialist SMSF account, because it's very different to a personal tax return. But too often, I've seen people paying $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 for a fairly simple SMSF tax return when they could be, getting it done for half that and paying a fee for a structure that shouldn't actually be there for a commoditized product. Yeah.
We were talking before about assets and buying quality assets. If you're opening a self-managed superannuation fund and getting no advice to buy what you think is a quality asset, with respect, that's fraught with danger unless you've got your own unique skill sets. But I know that there's something that we've spoken about before that I really liked hearing, which was your idea around investing money as if it's not yours. Can you speak to that?
It's kind of, I hope there's a few memes or GIFs going around about me saying fiduciary. but like, as an advisor, you have a fiduciary obligation to your client to act in their best interests. And we've also got it enshrined in legislation. But if you're a trustee of an SMSF and you're investing for your partner and you're investing for your children, you've got an obligation to be, investing in their best interests at all times. And to us, that means you need to have a structure and a strategy around it. And not just, and this probably relates to some of the biggest mistakes we've seen is it's not uncommon for some advised clients or non-advised clients to have, 50% in term deposits and 50% in what they think is a diversified portfolio of Australian shares. So my trap would be not, naive diversification. That's another thing we've kind of, we've coined. I think we took it from somewhere in the US, but this idea that, chasing dividends and holding 4 banks is diversified, even though all 4 banks are influenced by the same economic, inputs. And similarly, it's natural in Australia. Yes, there are benefits to having a franking credit driven portfolio of assets, but thinking that a portfolio of term deposits and Australian shares is going to be appropriate and sufficient to generate the income that you want for an extended period of time in retirement, I think is one of the biggest traps. It's very much that investment trap.
Yeah. Okay, so for mine, in summary here, one of the major tip for me is really around getting your investments right.
Yeah.
And especially with if you don't intend to have ongoing advice, and for God's sake, get some advice at the front end that's going to at least steer you in the right direction, wherever you get that from.
Shop around.
Yeah, that's right.
Always shop around. And the other one was just set up regular reviews. So we're boring. We do quarterly reviews for every client. And no matter what happens, every quarter you get one.
Yeah, us too.
That's something you should do as a trustee. And go, open that bottle of wine and pull out your quarterly portfolio update and review your performance. Because a lot of people we meet think they've done 12% per annum, but they're only looking at a portion of their assets and they're not comparing it to something that is similar to that. Like they'll look at how their equities have done and compare it against a balanced fund. So truly measuring your performance and working out if you're doing better, because you might be costing yourself and your family money by not getting professional advice, whether that's one of the three options, not just an advisor.
The last trap that I would suggest that we consider is if you have a self-managed superannuation fund and you might be over the moon with it or you might not be, don't fall for the trap of sunk cost bias. Yeah. Now, sunk cost bias, of course, it's that idea that when you've invested something, you are more likely to wait for it to come good rather than calling it as a bad investment. We've all had that experience of waiting for a bus. I don't know if I've caught the bus, or I don't know if the bus has already gone past, or what am I going to do? But you'll end up waiting at that bus stop for longer because you'd hate to have been at that bus stop for 20 minutes and then walk away and then it comes straight past. And that fear is really strong. And it's the same for investing. If you have bought a property or set up investments that and they're not doing as well as you'd hoped, don't make the mistake of telling yourself that story that, I just need to be patient, because that might not be true. Put your hand up, say, yep, okay, this hasn't quite worked. It's time to reevaluate my options and decide whether or not, make a proper decision if I should hold these assets or if I should change my strategy.
Yeah, and for us, that's all about having that framework. So we call it an investment policy. It can be 10 pages, it can be 2 pages. And it is simple things like you're holding a portfolio of 20 stocks across every sector of Australia. They're all equally weighted. If one halves, it either needs to be sold or doubled back to an average holding size. And if it doubles, it needs to be halved back to the appropriate holding size. So having a framework that allows you, when COVID happens, when the GFC happens, when any of these events happen, you've got something to fall back on to make decisions rather than, just holding on to all your losers and selling all your winners.
Yep.
And it probably, sunk cost bias probably applies to the SMSF itself. Just because you've got it set up, it doesn't mean you should keep doing it. And you should be patient. If it's not doing well and you're not involved and you're not engaged, well, there's plenty of other options and you'd probably be doing better if by switching to one of those.
Yeah. It takes some vulnerability to call out when you make investment mistakes, doesn't it?
I love bringing behavioral finance and psychology into it.
Yeah, well, especially when you've got total control over your money, like with a self-managed super fund, behavioral stuff it governs so much of what you do there. Let's roll on. We're going to move across to industry funds. Similarly, there's a lot of really critical tips and traps. But I'm going to, if I may, fling it across to you. What stands out for you here?
They're in the news a lot at the moment, aren't they? We'll probably stay away from that issue. I think they're generally, as we've said in the past, they're quite good for low balances and for people that aren't engaged with their money. But with industry funds, there's essentially no ability to get advice. So when we when we meet people, and I'm sure you have the same challenges, that we'll put an alternative superannuation option where they can have control, more transparency, but it'll be slightly higher in cost, or including our advice fee, it'll be higher in cost than the industry fund. But it's kind of this misunderstanding that, when you're paying an industry fund, you're paying for, that's the fee and you get everything and you get advice but essentially all you're getting is investment management. I think interestingly, and there's been so much change, I think we went from 50 to 60 industry funds to 7 that are relevant now. So there's been a massive amount of consolidation. And it's quite interesting, but they're always known for being the lowest cost. It was always 0.3, 0.4 from memory in a all-in fee that you're paying. And now on average, there's something like 0.7, 0.8, 0.9. So a part of that has been their, drive into unlisted assets, holding direct property, holding big infrastructure assets, and they've gotten so huge at $200 billion funds. So being careful that you're not in an expensive fund if cost is important to you. And I think, and similar to that is, APRA now has its own heat map, which assesses each fund on fees and on performance. So making sure you're not in a continuously or consistently underperforming fund, which is quite rare on its own anyway, because most of the time they're forced to shut down if they're underperforming. A good one there is that and I think this is important, don't always just look outright at historic performance. You shouldn't have to say it. It's in every ad, but all we ever hear is, but that one did 5% or 10% or whatever it is over the last 2, 3, 5, 7 years. There's actually a good measure I found. I think it was on Super Ratings, where they're actually putting forward risk-adjusted returns. So risk-adjusted returns being they're actually giving consideration to how much risk and volatility or the type of the asset allocation being used to generate those returns. And for us, that is so much more relevant than who got the best return last year, who just had more NVIDIA than anyone else.
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable point that you've made there around that risk adjustment, particularly as a retiree. If you had the option of Fund A or Fund B, and they're both going to return, let's say, 8% per annum every year, but one has swings of 10% month by month. Sometimes it's up 10%, sometimes it's down, and it's always chopping all over the place. Or you had another one that was really smooth and stable, and they both got the same outcome. Sure, you can appreciate that second investment is far better, even though the return is the same. So if you're just looking at the return, then you're right. You wouldn't be able to discern that one investment is going to give you a lot less sleepless nights, a lot more confidence around your retirement.
Yeah, particularly when you're only seeing, a one unit price maybe every 6 months or 3 months or so. And I think one of the biggest things for us being focused, given we only work with retirees or those from kind of 55 plus, is that pretty much every industry fund, even the ones that are called retirement, are pretty much set up for accumulators and for people who are continually contributing money in. Their asset allocations are naturally more aggressive. So to us, a balanced fund is 50% in defensive assets like cash and term deposits, 50% in growth assets like shares. A balanced fund in most of the industry fund world is 80% in growth assets and 20% in defensive.
Sounds super balanced.
Yeah. I think being wary that they're not, and this is an issue that you're seeing at the moment, that a lot of people end up rolling out of their industry funds as they get closer to retirement, whether for transparency, control, costs, ability to get advice. But it seems to be a trend, and that's because I think the average member is still in their 20s or 30s. And generally you have lower balances. So these groups are able to rely on that and invest into, more aggressive and more growth-oriented assets.
Yeah. We spoke about in an earlier episode that idea of strategic advice, particularly around as you approach retirement, whatever that retirement age is, let's for simplicity say at 65. If I think a real trap is going through or being in autopilot at 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, because this is an incredibly fertile time for financial advice and what we call strategic advice. So let's set the returns of the fund aside. Let's even to an extent ignore the actual fund itself and where your money's invested, but your own individual situation. What are all the levers that you can pull in order to maximize your wealth over the last 5 to 10 years, but really dialing into those last, let's say, 5.
Super contributions, pensions, recontribution strategies, all types of kind of potentially tax and cost benefits.
Correct.
Insurance reviews.
Spot on.
Estate planning, which we'll discuss later.
And, all these things and noting that so much of that too is there's so many opportunities that exist at that tail, and a lot of people that I sit with who might have come to us with, let's say, a year to go and say, I'm just about to retire. In your own mind, you think to yourself, oh, I wish we had a bigger runway here. There's heaps that we could have done. But they've still been in that cruise control phase as they've approached retirement. And part of that is because their money's in an industry fund and that's a set and forget type thing. Yeah. So please, as a trap, please make sure you differentiate your set and forget strategy around investments. For example, my money's with Australian Super, and so that I'm happy with that, versus set and forget for strategy, because there's a huge amount of financial strategy that is not going to get covered by in industry super fund, indeed any superannuation fund, and that I think when you're in an industry fund, you can be in that state of cruise control for too long.
Like someone will call you and help you, but essentially, unless you call them or go via their app, they're not really going to tell you much. They might hold a member for them, and then when you do call, there's going to be very, very general. So it's what can I do? You can contribute, you can start a pension, you can do this, you can do that, but not any creativity or flexibility around that, or any personalized advice to that level.
I think that's getting better as there's consolidation of super funds like that, but certainly regardless, it's a big thing to dial into. You mentioned something before, which I'd love to also cover or re-emphasize, which is that idea of looking at the consistency of returns rather than what they did at this data point.
Yeah.
So you were talking about the APRA heat map before, and for those of you that aren't familiar with it, the APRA heat map, APRA basically governs all superannuation funds, amongst other things, and their heat map is designed to shed light on who's performing really well this year and who's performing badly this year, and then to
shut them down.
Yeah, to either shut them down or at least put their name up in red light and say, hey, this particular fund underperformed for the year. And personally, I hate this strategy. I think it's terrible. And the reason that I do is because it results in every superannuation fund taking a conservative line with investments to try to make sure they hug the average.
The benchmark, yeah.
You don't want to be the super fund that outperforms by 10% one year, 10% the next year, and then underperforms by 5% the year after, because what's going to be remembered is that only a year ago or whenever you were one of the worst performing funds. And that's that to me, I recognize the need to try to create some consistency around the way that money's invested in super, but an annual, how did you go for this particular year, and were you in the best performing 20 or the lowest performing 20, and having your name put up in lights there, I think that creates conservatism across the entire system, which oughtn't be there.
And focus is basically, you now have generally super funds that are seeking relative returns.
That's right.
They don't want to be too far different from each other.
Correct.
And that's honestly, in my experience, the opposite of what you want in retirement. You've got a finite pool of capital. You don't want to be relying, they're basically all going back to the benchmark. So their Australian shares will be benchmarked against the ASX 200. You're just not incentivized to take risk against that. So they'll naturally go back towards that benchmark. And what that means to us is in retirement, if you're tracking the benchmark and it falls 20, you're going to lose 20. The hope is that by blending, passive and active, or having a core satellite, or having a more diversified portfolio using something like, an asset allocation strategy, you can smooth those returns and make them more consistent in retirement rather than swinging with the market. So that was a great kind of point, I think, to finish off on, and probably a good segue to the next area, which is pretty close to our heart, hopefully.
Yeah, let's talk about getting financial advice. Let's roll through some tips and traps, and how can you do this well?
I mean, I can probably say it easily but it took me 15 years to get there, which is what you need to do is make sure the advisor you're talking to is specializing or has significant or experience in the area you need advice on. So we might be talking about retirement on this podcast, but we know retirement can be thought about in your 40s, and we'll do an episode on early retirement, in your 50s, 60s and 70s. And each of those periods needs some level of different skill. Essentially, you want to find an advisor, one that you can build rapport with, and you feel comfortable. And I think one of the big things I have in advice, but also in people, is that I want the client to talk more. Like, you want to be asking questions, you don't want your advisor talking the whole time, as we talk on a podcast.
Not lost on me
at a time.
Play on.
And I think it's very much about having something they specialize in. So not everyone has to specialize in retirement, but there's been an issue in the industry that advisors were generalists. So they did a little bit of insurance, they did a little bit of mortgages, they did a little bit of super, they did a little bit of SMSFs, but never really specialized. So that's something we're very big on, and we work with other firms essentially to make sure we're not taking on clients that fall outside where our skill set is. You share that view?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, particularly around that relationship piece, and if you're sitting down with an advisor and all they're doing is just talking to you and describing what's going on with your portfolio, et cetera, that not only are they missing something really critical, but you are too, which is that your advisor should have a really strong understanding of where you're at and where you're going, and have a really strong understanding of what you're going to need your funds for, and be able to communicate to you in real terms, as in the sense of your life and your plans, why these decisions are best for you. And I think that too often, especially with retirement, there's so many strategic benefits around retirement that you can get a little bit lost in all the numbers, whereas financially we're going to be doing this and doing this and doing this and doing this. If you don't feel really confident, if you can't have it relayed back to you that we're doing this particular thing because that's going to improve my quality of life. It's going to give me more certainty because I said that in 2 years' time I want to do this and that money's going to be marked for that. If you don't have that, then you are really missing something here.
Yeah, I think you want to know exactly what you're paying for. There's a history of advisors seeing you once a year. An advisor can have 1,000+ clients, and you call them, and that's when you end up having your meeting. So making sure their service, their value proposition and service proposition is there, and it's something that you want, I think is a massive one. And then I started writing down questions. So I think we all get the kind of ASIC updates every now and then, and about when advisors or people purporting to be advisors are banned. And there's kind of things that come up in that are probably good questions to ask or good things to consider when you're looking for an advisor. And it's things like, does it feel like that the service you're receiving or the product you're receiving is the same as everyone else? Like I feel like it's okay for an advisor to have a model portfolio that they run off, because that's the way you essentially are able to ensure the returns that your clients are generating are consistent regardless of when they come in. But is it just an off-the-shelf product? Is it, every advisor has to have an approved product list that they can operate off? How diverse is their approved product list?
Yep.
Yes, it's all right to use a managed account, which is probably too detailed for this. But are they only offering one sort of product? And then one question would be, how do they respond if you ask for alternatives to that? Is it, are they open to considering things that aren't just the perfect thing that they've got set up? So the days of advice being solely product-based, I'm happy to say are kind of disappearing.
Yeah, me too. We are really moving past that.
But it is something always to be careful of. And then a couple of others were around this. There's this idea of kind of implementation only or scaled advice. So advisors have an obligation to consider all of your circumstances unless you individually tell them you don't want them to look at insurance or super or something specific. They should generally start with everything. So if it's being scaled back without your knowledge, without you asking for it, always be wary. And if they're executing investments but not providing any other advice, that's generally something to look out for as well.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. I don't think we need to go too deep on the tips because we're going to pepper this entire podcast with reasons why you might get advice. But around traps, I agree with you on that, particularly the idea that from a value perspective, you should feel really confident too. If you have any apprehension about whether or not you're getting, or if you're getting the right amount of value, then you should have the courage to raise that. And what's more, you should be able to observe your advisor answer that question really confidently and explain really clearly why you are materially better off going through this, and not just strategically, but also financially, why you're going to be much better off doing the things that you're doing. I think if you're asking good questions and you're observing good answers, I think that's a really, really positive start. Having confidence in your advisor is, for mine, like one of the most important things,
and
if not the most.
Not excuses, like in any professional relationship. You don't want excuses about why they didn't do something. You want responsiveness. And it doesn't always have to be fully proactive. Like, I'm not sure about you, but it's not like we want to buy this stock tomorrow. You don't necessarily have to be that proactive, but at least being very responsive when a client contacts you. Your advisor should always be immediately kind of acknowledging, not necessarily answering your questions as quickly as possible, or at least having a framework to do it.
Hey, I'm going to move on to risk profiles if I can. So one thing that people will do, and it makes a lot of sense as you approach retirement, is change your investment composition to perhaps take a little bit less risk. Can you speak to why people do that?
Common questions you get, like literally straight away. And it's different now that interest rates are significantly higher than they were 3 or 4 years ago. But I think the tip here, or the trap here, is that there is no simple rule to retirement and how you should invest when you get to retirement. It very much depends on, one, what your objectives are and the position you're in when you retire. So there's rules that say you should have the percentage of bonds should be your age or something at different periods during your retirement, or just very specific rules about asset allocation, and we know
they don't work.
They just don't work over time. I'm sure everyone can back test and find a way to make that work in different experiences, but there's no simple rule that works, and it very much depends. Like this goes back to having what do you look for in an advisor? You want an advisor that will have a conversation and say, you've said you need this much. This is how much you have. These are your options. Because in most cases it could be, well, you can reduce how much income you need. You can continue working for a while, or potentially we might need to take more, be more focused on growth and higher returning assets in your portfolio. And this is something they should give you the option to weigh up and consider, and give you the costs and benefits of both, essentially, because it isn't straightforward.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's. I'm going to add to this around a tip here, which is when you're thinking about your own risk profile and perhaps how you should invest your money, the word here is drawdown.
Yeah,
drawdown is how much your portfolio will realistically fall in the event of a market event. And we communicate to our members, especially sometimes you find someone where you think you probably need to be invested a little bit more aggressively because you've got a small retirement balance, but you've got reasonably high expenses and you want to keep it that way. So the trade-off is that your money's going to might need to be invested a bit more in growth assets. Well, what's the drawdown? What's the maximum drawdown with this type of portfolio? And that's normally you can get that from, even in an industry fund, you can get that information available, or you could speak to them and I dare say get that answer. And for example, if it's 20%, okay, in a worst case scenario, in a really major event, it's going to fall 20%. Practically, what does that mean? All right, I've got a balance of, let's say $500,000. So that means that it would be at 400. Yeah, I can handle that. Well,
can you?
Air brakes. Yeah. So
I've been on the phone to a lot of people in that situation.
Definitely.
Generally, you can't.
Yeah. Well, the hardest part about that particular moment is that you don't know that that's the bottom. Yeah. I remember being an advisor during the sea. Not as an advisor, but the person facilitating all the phone calls from people that were really upset to hand pass it to the advisor when they were available. And you were talking to people that maybe had $1 million and it had fallen down to 800,000 over the last 14 months and still falling by, falling by 1% a day. It was just this really panicky environment, and people are legitimately fearful that 20% could turn into 40%, could turn into even more. So having a sense for what the maximum drawdown is of your portfolio as it is, and
whether you're comfortable with that,
and can I actually feel comfort there when my portfolio falls from 500 down to 390, and at that time it's all fire and brimstone because there isn't that optimism in the markets to push things up again. How am I going to feel as an investor with my money? And if I can be resolute there and say that's all good, I can tolerate that, then great. But if not, then with respect, we probably have you allocated incorrectly.
Yeah, and I think a massive part of managing that drawdown is via, what we've talked about, asset allocation, and then actually being truly diversified in the assets and portfolio you're building, and kind of extending on that discussion around investing returns, investing for the long term, or what level of asset allocation is appropriate. I think we sometimes forget that if you've got significant assets, and that could be 2, 3, 4 million in super, in most cases, you're not going to spend that in your lifetime. And at some point, you're actually investing for the next generation. And that comes speeds through to, it's very boring, and I'm sure every firm has it, but we have a golden rule, which is income plus growth equals total return. It's a golden rule. But it's just this idea that you can't, even if you've got more than enough assets for yourself, you're still going to have to have a portion of that looking towards growing those assets. One, to keep up with inflation, and then two, generally, secondly, to increase the probability that your money outlasts you, and then thirdly, because a portion of this you're probably investing for the next generation. So investing for income alone, and we'll probably do a case study on this later on, is just, in my view, I think is overly simplifying what people are searching for in retirement.
All right, there you have it. There are some big tips and traps to avoid before retirement. The truth is that we had a list a lot longer than what we've gone through, so we might have to come back for another ep and cover off some of the other things here, mate. But really great to get your perspectives on this.
Hopefully we weren't up on the soapbox too much, but hopefully there were some useful ideas in there.
Yeah, totally agreed. So thank you to everyone for being part of it, and look forward to the next episode.
Good to see you.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.